So let's see. So there is like a disequilibrium between my right and my left. So let's wait everyone arrive. Okay, let's go. So I hope you have enjoyed your free afternoon yesterday. Now you are fresh today for the second part of the summer school. And today I will give you a lecture. The topic was the politics of policymaking, where I will discuss with you about a mix between a theoretical approach that I will present you, which is what I call a pragmatist approach, but I have no time to develop too much, but I will mix it by presenting you case studies to show you how this kind of approach, which is different from a lot of classical approach you can have on policy process, and which is more inspired by a French tradition. And here we have Osmani. Where is it? Maybe it's from São Paulo, and he just published an edit book about the French approach, with a more sociological dimension. And what is important, it's something we discussed with my group yesterday, is also to understand one point: how to understand the policy-making process. It's supposed to study not only far away, but very in detail what is the policy-making process. So, just before I begin the case, because yesterday there is a lot of people who seems to don't know what is shale gas. I have just had a little slide. So I just explain in 1 minute, and after you will understand why. So what we call, so here is underground. So the gas, the natural gas, is generally not so far away, and if you drill with the pressure, it's come back. It's easy. But shale gas, which is very deeper in the underground, is a gas which is prisoner, and to extract it, the problem is very diffuse. So we know the shale gas exists in the world since long time, but it's only after 2005 that specifically some American company discover new techniques, because we call this the fracking technique, who can drill not only vertically, like traditional gas, but also horizontally. With this new technique, suddenly a gas that no one used because it was too costly to use, become accessible and allow United States to become, in 3 or 4 years, the most important producer of gas in the world. And the second thing, I push you here the map. So it changed the map of who have gas and oil, who have not. So you see how it can be important. And for a government, we know that import gas, the price of gas is very expensive, and it's very real important things. So maybe you know this guy. It's a French guy, famous in France. And what is interesting is in 2011, the French government decided to ban the possibility to explore the shale gas. And this guy, Nicolas Sarkozy, say, I can't accept that US become independent in terms of energy because shale gas, and France can't receive the benefit of this new energy, which allow when unemployment ravage so many families and territory. It is unacceptable. So it's an interesting declaration, just a little regard, you know how people can put in the same statement the issue. What is the issue? Unemployment, massive issue, and a solution, which is just here. So it's interesting to observe this capacity of give meaning to shale gas. Shale gas help France to solve the problem of unemployment. But what is very funny is not this. Is what? This declaration was in 2014. The law who banned shale gas come from 2011. And who was the president of the Republic of France in 2011 who decided to ban shale gas? Is Nicolas Sarkozy. Ah, now it's become more interesting. You see? Suddenly, this guy is not say only it's unacceptable, it's only also criticize himself. Is it change his mind? Is it decide against himself or against his point of view? We begin to have what we call like an enigma. But what is more an enigma again is if I come back to what decides the French government, is not one solution, banning shale gas, is three solutions. Because if I come back to the historical way, the January 27, 2011, the date is important. In decision making, the date is always important. In the 27th January, the French government, there is a lot of solicitation to say, oh, you need to frozen, because they offer some license to drill shale gas in France. So there is a mobilization and say, oh, you need to ban shale gas. What says the government? The Minister of Environment answer, hey guys, first, it's juridically impossible to frozen the license we have already done. Second, shale gas is not a problem. Oh, in US it's a problem. Guy is always stupid in France. In US it's a problem, but in France we have norm, solid norm, and it's not a problem. This is what the government says the 27th January. The 1st February, 4 days later, the same government declare, finally, we've frozen the shale gas license. You remember what it was impossible 3 days before become possible. And we don't know if it's dangerous. We asked to a committee of high civil servants, or 4 high civil servant experts, to give us a point of view about is it dangerous or not. So, radical change in 4 days. And they asked to these 4 experts to give their answers the 15th April, so 2 months later. You follow me? It's important. The 30 March, so 15 days before the expert gives their report, the parliament and the government decide to propose a law to ban shale gas. We know that the report expert who was published in 15 April was in favor of shale gas. So they change another time their opinion. 3 times in 3 months. It's not in 3 years or in 10 years. In 3 months. The government changed its position and finally decide to ban shale gas. So, we discussed a lot about what is a research question. This is a research question. Why the government decide to ban the shale gas? Why the French government and the President Nicolas Sarkozy decide to ban fracking, even if it's considered as an economical growth, even if it's supported by a lot of interest groups like Total. Total is not a little group. It's a huge French international group. Why? And why the government decided to change so many times? Where each solution come from? So, when you decide to investigate a question, and as you understand, the question is not here the shale gas, is understanding the policy process. It's just an example, and it's an example which is always a critical example. Because it's what we can do is to go in the classical explanation. So what we have as classical explanation? The most classical first explanation is the weight of interest groups, the weight of actors. Is the weight of actors play a role? A lot of people say, oh, you know, the interest group now governs the world. It's not the government. There is a famous philosopher, Colin Crouch, who say we are not in democracy now. He calls this a post-democracy. Because in the government have no power. It's really the big company, and specifically the international company. So if you put in one side who was really against banning and who was for banning, sure, you have against banning the group Total, JDF, two big group, interest group. You have also the prime minister and the president was, you know, you see Sarkozy. He was against banning. The Ministry of Industry and even Europe decide to support shale gas. So many strong actors. At the opposite, who you are? You have some environmental activists. You have some local mayor. And you have the Ministry of Environment was against shale gas. I just put, just for joking, how many times in France at this period a Minister of Environment arrived to stay in his position. It's between 3 months and 1 year. And each time they leave the situation, we have the same kind of article in the newspaper. Oh, she was a Ministry of Environment, but she left because she was attacked by the lobby. He was a famous Ministry of Environment. He stayed not a lot of time, and he accused the lobby. So it seems that the lobby is so strong. They influence the decision-making process, the policy process, but finally not in this case. So you can consider at the opposite, but finally it's because we have not observing correct, we have not measured correctly the weight. Maybe who has the weight is this group, this coalition. But there is like a paradox. If you consider that who has the weight, who's win, we call this a tautology. Each time you just see who win and you say this is who has the weight. But the weight is not an explanation in this case. It's just an a posteriori explanation. So it's not really satisfactory. The second explication that we can find is what we call the social mobilization. It's true, there is a mobilization against shale gas. There is even some actors who told me, oh, you know, you think that with industry, even people from industry, because I say, oh, maybe you think that the industry is strong, but it's not. It's environmentalist who is strong in France. Okay, there is the most important manifestation against shale gas was 10,000 people. So just imagine 3 weeks ago, we have more than 3 million of people who manifest against pension reform in France and the government not move. So if we think there is a link between manifestation and this policy process, it's not 10,000 people who play a role if 3 million don't arrive to play a role. So it's not really satisfied. So we can go now in more classical theory of policy process, more modern, more recent theory. So we know that all this theory, so you have ACF, you have a punctual equilibrium, you have a kingdom model, so you know maybe or you're familiar more or less with some of them. Generally, they consider that most of the policy process come from what they call a policy subsystem or a policy stream. This is where the solution comes from. And they try to identify generally, like in a systemic view, what they call the exogenous causal and the endogenous causal. Exogenous causal, they say, for example, problem agenda. We know that when a problem arrives in the agenda, in the mediatic agenda, it can contribute to the decision. There is also some other explanation, the deterioration of image, of policy image, or the political election. But in this case, first, you know there is election all the time in France. You don't know in Brazil, but every 2 years you have a big election. So at the end, the variable of election don't say a lot of things if it's every time. Second, problem agenda. It's probably one of the good elements. Why? Because if you see that, what is it? It's the number of articles in a newspaper. So here in March 2010 is the date when the French government authorized 3 licenses, giving 1 to Total, 2 to another company, to authorize shale gas exploration. What you observe? No article about shale gas. Very few. 1, 2. December 2010, the first public meeting about shale gas. And suddenly, whoa. If people want to understand what is an agenda setting process in the mediatic agenda, you have a good illustration. No one speaks about a topic. Every newspaper speaks about a topic. It's really visible. But, so it can be an explanation because December, January 2010, a lot of articles speak about shale gas. And finally, the government reacts end of January, beginning of February, and March, April, and vote in June. So it's not bad. But in a lot of this kind of explanation, even we can speak about some internal explanation, there is one big issue. What is it? The big issue in all this model, that we can call the causal model, they explain the fact that there is a change. The process, the changing process begins because probably there is a link with the problem agenda setting. But what they don't explain is why they choose this solution and not this other. And what they really not explain is how a government can change 3 times their proposal. Because finally, you have the same context, the same element, there is 3 change. So, and with all this, take the model of kingdom, for example, we say, oh, there is the stream of problem who arrive, it's true, and the solution stream. So they explain the first change, the first solution. But what they say about the second change 4 days later? And what they say about the third solution 1 month later? Nothing, because it's exactly the same context and the same situation. So this is what we can call a critical problem, a critical case for all this kind of model. So you have 2 choices in this case. The first one to say, oh, but if this case is an exception. But, you know, in academic field, it's a discussion we have with my group, at what moment a critical case can become the way to kill a theory. And we have a lot of examples we saw in some times. Maybe it's not the case which is an exception. Maybe the theory is not enough to understand the policy process. So, and you know, in academic field, if I come back to a famous Popper thing, the question is not how many white cat you see if you think that all the cat is white. You need only 1 black cat to kill your theory. So this case is a critical case in that sense. So what are you doing? I look for another theory who help me to better understand this. The first thing I like to do in this kind of exploration, the first thing, which is easy, you know, we know that story is built by the winner. Everyone knows that. So ask to the loser, what is their story? It's an idea. So here you have 2 expressions. The first one is from Christopher de Margerie, who was the president of Total. And what he said? He said, I'm fascinated by the way in which the term fracking has crystallized so many divisions. In the United States, we talk about massaging the rock. Maybe it's an idea. And the second is the president of JDF, gas company. The word fracking is not enough to describe all possible technology. We need to talking about maybe stimulation of the rock. What they say? They say one thing. What they have lose? They have lose the meaning struggle. They have lose their capacity to impose to fracking and to shale gas a meaning which is acceptable. It's what they say. They want to change the meaning. It means that they lose the meaning. So it's an idea. What is the role of the meaning in their fight? So, to really understand what's happened, we need to change the perspective of a lot of classical theory by rejecting the idea that everything is inside what we call a policy subsystem, a large system, who produce solution. We need also to identify by something I evoke, I go quickly, a problem. A lot of literature consider that a problem is a social construction. In textbook of public policy, you have a lot of this. But most of them don't consider that solution is a social construction or coupling is a social construction. So I would like to take this into account. A lot of process, when you look for the causality, don't really take into account the argumentative process, the meaning process. What is the role of meaning in the process? And a lot of theory consider that the correlation is already exist. We want to inverse this. We want to say, okay, stop the theory. Stop the model who maybe you think it helps you to understand, but maybe at the end, it just biases you to understand. And come back to the observation. How I can observe concretely how the government have worked in front of the policy problem they meet. Who was at the origin of each solution? Remember, we have 3 solutions. Who have wrote it? Who have the pen, you know? Who have wrote the text? How many people have discussed about each solution? How was confronted to what kind of critics? How a solution, what was the trajectory of each solution to arrive to become a decision of the government? And what was the situation who provoked the death of a solution? So, to answer to my question, my method is to come back to what is the most important thing. It's not the model or theory, it's the empirical reality. Never forget that whatever the theory in social science, the theory is only here to grasp the reality, to understand this complex reality. So, to really understand, I just want to attract the view. I want to take into account 3 important dimensions. The first one is what I call taking into account not a policy subsystem or a policy stream, but a multiple venue. I want to change the level of observation. It's not a middle level, it's a micro level. See each office, each civil servant, each bureaucrat who have contributed to discuss with this solution, with each solution. What was the discussion inside the department, inside the office, with the chief of department, with the chief of the department, with the cabinet of minister, with the minister itself? What was the link with interministerial meeting, where there is fighting between different meetings? What was the link with interest group? Not a general link, but who have met what? Who? Who tried to influence who? At what level? What was exactly the discussion? To understand the policy making, we propose to come back to the concrete observation and reconstitution of the process. It means that looking the number of policy venues. Second, to understand what's happened, we need to observe something which is really important in this approach. It's what we call the discursive practice. You know, there is a lot of theory about network. So maybe you have seen, there is a network theory, so you have one guy, and suddenly you have a link, it's a line. But what is a line? Empirically, you know, I don't put a line between you. It does not exist. What's happened when someone meets someone? They discuss. What was the relationship between, if I want to understand the relationship between A and B, I need to observe their discursive practice. Why I use the concept of discursive practice? It's to explain that there is a difference between, it's not a discourse as a discourse. I know that some people use interview or use text and put a lot of things in a big chat GPT models or something like that and try to say, oh, what say all this discourse? No. A discourse is what? Is someone say to someone else something. What is important is what was my intention when I say that, what was the meaning I give to my sentence, and what is the understanding of the person I spoke about. And what was the discussion, how we discuss. So, if I want to understand, I need to not separate what we call the discourse and the practice, because discourse is a practice. If I try to convince you, this is what I tried today. I try to convince you that my approach is the best one. Why you joke? No, you know what I mean. This is a discursive practice. If finally no one was wake up this morning because they take too many beer yesterday, I can't convince anyone. I can speak alone. Or I can have a camera. Maybe I can use YouTube with the number of you, you know. But even if I know the number of you, how many people I receive my message. So discursive practice is nothing else that something when we are interested in the same time by the human activities first and by the content of what they say. Remember that one of the main issues of all the theory I present you is the difficulty to link together the process, there is a change, the content of change. If you're coming to be interested by the discursive practice, it means that you link suddenly the content, what they say, to the relationship. What kind of relationship they have. And it's important because you can just go to Facebook and see how many friends you have. Is it really a network? Is it because you say, oh, I want to go in this place, suddenly your 5,000 of friends come and go. No, it's not work like this. Be in link, not mean a relationship. So we need to observe this and to consider that in the different practice, there is two practices which is really important. The first one is what we call the definition of the problem dramatic statement. How people arrive to transform the shale gas question into a drama. The second one is to observe how people arrive to propose solution and to define solution to solve the shale gas problem. So the definitional practice about problematization and problem solving is really important. 3, if I have an idea one day, to say, oh, I know how I can save the world, but I'm alone. How an idea coming from one person be propagated in a multitude of people? A lot of theory consider that collective action is not an issue, but specifically in sociology, we will discuss Friday afternoon with the roundtable about the importance of sociology. In most of the sociology approach, collective action is a problem. We don't act together just like because we have the same value, for example. There is sometimes, oh, you have the same value. We all want to be happy about public policy. Is it the reason we are in a coalition? It's like a virus, you know. If you want to observe the virus, you need to understand how they propagate. So how a discourse, a statement is propagated. How a coalition is building. How we can open the black box of this concept that we call coalition. 4, we want to understand how the statement is built, how the coalition is built, and we want to understand how coalition fight. Why some idea disappear? Who fight against what? There is all the time conflict in all policy process. Why? Because first, a policy proposal generates winner and loser. So it's not neutral. No policy proposal is neutral. If you say, I ban shale gas, and so you have Total who is not happy, you have a lot of people who is not happy, you have some ministries, the Ministry of Industry who is not happy. So if they lose the conflict, and etc. So there is winner and loser, so it means when you have something, you need to fight. Fighting is one of the most important activity each time you open the black box of bureaucracy. And the fighting is something very important. In one sense, I take the example yesterday. Sorry for my repeat. If you want to understand a football game between France and Brazil, you don't just observe the characteristic of all the players of France with Mbappé and Brazil with Neymar and say who win. You need to observe what's happened during the soccer game. The fighting is even David can win against Goliath sometime. Because during the fighting, there is a lot of things to happen. And one of the problems of a lot of these policy process theories is to consider before, what they call the causality, sometimes inside, but not enough, what I can call the gear. What event during the match have an impact on the event? For example, we will see that there is a link between the success and the failure of each proposal to the new one. No model consider this. 5, and last, I just have to follow the time. We need to understand the different venue. I say that the venue is important. We need to go not in a policy subsystem or whatever, but to go inside a more detailed perspective. And to better understand, I suggest 3 terms that I will use a lot of time. The first one is what I call the public forum. I don't develop a lot. It's the idea that when you speak in front of a public like this, you know, I speak during 1 hour, and I develop what Perelman say, a conviction process. You can't react. You can say yes, you can joke, you can applaud, not applaud, but it's not a discussion. And the public space is like this. You don't know why I speak. It's because I want to convince you. But if I discuss directly with you, we have an exchange. We can, so Perelman calls this a persuasion. I don't use the same, I use an argument, and I see that you react, oh, no, I'm not totally convinced by this, so I use another argument, I transform my argument. So this is the process of a persuasion, a discussion. Well, when I speak in public, it's not the same rule. I can't say the same thing. The rule of discussion, of conviction, is not the same. So it means that the argument I use is also not only depend of me, it depends of the kind of audience I speak about. So the public forum is always first a conflictual space. I use the concept of forum because it's in the Roman system it was like this. But it's not everyone can speak. There is people who have the microphone and people who have not. Bourdieu calls this the skeptron. So the right to speak. Who has the right to speak? There is an authorization to speak. They give me the authorization to speak today. If you want to speak to the media, but maybe on 100 persons who speak to a media, maybe 10 arrive to have an article. So it's not everyone who has access to the media. But the public space, the visible space, we have a lot of studies about public space. It's easy. You just go to your computer and you can find all the articles of the newspaper. This is the accessible space. But what is important if you want to understand the policy process is to open the hidden space. You can't understand any policy-making process without understand what's happened in the hidden space. All the meeting, all the discussion, all the confrontation was taken in the what I call the hidden space. And in this hidden space, I identify 2 kinds of hidden space, organized differently. What I call the policy atrium. It's atrium in the Roman tradition was a house. If you are invited in my house, you never forget that I'm the owner. I'm the owner of policy atrium. And it means that I put the rule of the house. So in the concept of policy atrium, the main idea is each policy atrium is a space where you have a group of dominant actors who impose their own rules and their own logic of debate. For example, I will show you an example for the shale gas, but for example, if you are in a meeting with juridical people, or if you are a meeting with people who know very well how to manage a camera to take you, and you discuss technically about what's happened, you can't say anything, because if they say, oh, no, it's not possible, like this, we can do this, we can... You should just say, yes, you're not specialist. The specialists have the capacity to impose and to dominate the field. And you have another concept that I call the policy arena. It's where there is not one dominant actor. When there is a conflict between different legitimacy, between different order of things. In my case, for example, any interministerial discussion generally is an arena. Any discussion between 2 departments is an arena. Because each department has its own logic, but to regulate this, you can have one dominant logic, one dominant actors. It's a conflictual thing. So these 2 concepts in some part exist in the literature, but the difference is the size. If you consider that it's all the policy subsystem like this, it means that if there is one policy monopole, one policy atrium, there is no space of debate of where is the conflict. In my view, when I explode the idea of policy subsystem to see the reality as a multiple venue of the process, you see in some parts some policy atrium and some policy arena. And the trajectory can be more, there is a lot of possibility of trajectory for each solution. Let's come back now in my example. I don't do this one because I have no time. It was the process of problem agenda setting. So I would like to focus on the policy solution. So we have three solutions, remember? The first one is to say, oh, frozen is juridically impossible. And shale gas is not a problem. Remember this? It's the Ministry of Environment who say that in the French Parliament, the 27th January, even if 4 days later, she said, oh, finally it's possible. Remember this? So, where it come from? To understand this, we need to understand who have built this solution, who have put the word in the discourse of this ministry, the Minister of Environment. And what we will see is each solution was not built in the same place. The first solution I evoke was formulated by a specific office in the Department of Energy. The second solution was built by the chief of the department. And the first solution was built by some member of parliament. So it means that the place and the venue where solution is formulated and defined is different. And it's have an impact. Let's come back to this first solution. No problem, impossible to frozen. You remember this? It was a discourse of the Ministry of Environment, the 26th January. France is not USA, frozen is juridically impossible. I try to reconstitute how was happened. So what I don't show you, but you can find on the book, I put this on the Dropbox, it's around January, the number of newspapers about shale gas as a problem increase, largely. And what's happened? Around this period, so the first public meeting was the 20 December. But it's not because it's, you have meeting and you have some article that the media agenda provokes the governmental agenda. You remember this. But even the concept of governmental agenda is a problematic. I come back on this. What is interesting is what? What we observe is around end of December, beginning of January, all this alert in the media and his email is grasped by the cabinet of the Minister of Energy. Why? Because the role of cabinet is to find problem. They exist because they find problem. They find problem and they can put the administration to answer to this problem. Because all the regulatory policy is managed by the department and the director of energy. But the cabinet has this part. But the cabinet is a mix between technician and politician. So they be mobilized, they receive a lot of email for the minister about the question of shale gas. They know nothing about shale gas. What is it? So what they say? They ask to the director, so it was in cabinet, they ask to the director of the department of energy. But the director of department knows nothing about shale gas. What he asks? He asks to this director of who in charge of this. So this director don't know a lot of things about this. What he do? He asks to the office who is specialist of the question. So this is the organigram of the Department of Energy. And in all this department, you have one office, one little office, who is the real specialist and who have given the license. They are in charge of the license process. They know everything about this process. So, who is this guy and what's happened? First, they call this the Hydrocarbon Exploration and Production Office of the Sub-Department of Security and of Supply and New Energy Product of the General Department for Energy and Climate of the Ministry of Ecology and Sustainable Development. This is the system of this. Who is this guy? Is around 15 persons. I study them a lot. First, they are the gatekeeper of the democratic process. When you arrive in their office, they show you this map. What is this map? It's the process you need to understand if you want to ask a license for the gas. This means that they are the gatekeepers. They know how to do to have a license. They are also experts about the condition of validity of your demand. If you want to demand a license, they know what is. They not only judge the demand. They also explain you what is the condition of validity, juridical condition, but also economical condition. And they have the monopoly of the knowledge about this kind of exploration and demand. They have the monopoly. So, if we reconstitute what was happened for giving the license, you remember, the French gave 3 licenses. So, it was in 2010, but in reality, the process began in 2008. There is a US company who go to this office and who want to ask a demand for have an authorization to explore the shale gas. So there are 3 demands, which consider 3 authorizations. And but this office was so happy to receive them, I come back on this, help them to build the authorization. It's a co-construction. It's not a demand and the administration treat. It's a co-construction. They are invest in the demand. And what is interesting is there is one moment during the process where this demand, there is 3 demands, this demand become public, even if no one show in the newspaper this demand. It's public. And when it's public, there is an authorization to propose, because it's a monopoly, if you have an authorization on the state, to propose a competitive, an alternative demand. And Total, the last day is not, ask 2 of the 3 demands of the Schubart Society, which is Texan. What is interesting in this case is you say, oh, Total is French, come on. Schubart is US. So they give the 2 licenses to Total. No, they give only 1. What's happened? In the Department of Energy, this guy of the office is really unhappy against the guy of Total. Why? Because they don't construct the demand with them. So they don't support them. And they explain to the chief, we need to reject. You know, they give the last day, they not construct with us. We have now create what we can call a kind of little coalition. And they propose to their chief to reject. So Total have some network, for sure. One of them is what we call the, it's something you have probably not in, I don't know. Yes, we have, we discuss about this. In the high civil servant, you have some specialty. You have the treasurer specialty in the high civil servant. So in France, we call this the Grand Corps. And one of the Grand Corps is what we call le Corps des Mines. It's people who have made situation. There are people who love trains, there is people who love underground. And they are fascinating. They want to know more about underground. They're happy when anyone arrives to propose to see what there is inside underground. So, and they consider that there is a norm with geologics in Europe, not like in US. So, you begin to remember the famous first solution. So when they receive the question coming from the director and the cabinet, what they say? They ask us, is it a problem and can we frozen? So they prepare a note. We explain that frozen is impossible and it's not a problem. The note comes back to the director gives it to the cabinet, and the cabinet gives it to the ministry, and the ministry gives this in the parliament. This is a trajectory. But in this trajectory, there is one problem. Suddenly, we have changed. In the beginning, we have like an atrium. If you discuss with these office people, you can't discuss. They know everything about the rule, about the legal system. So you just have in an atrium. But when you are inside, you can't discuss. But when the ministry becomes the one who speaks in the public forum, suddenly it's not the same game. It's not the same place. It's not the same rule of debate. You have a new person, the Ministry of Environment, who is not really attached to this statement, and a new place of space of debate, the public forum. And what's happened? During 3 days, there is a lot of critics. Specifically, one of the opponents, José Bové, said, hey, guy, you say we are not US, but the companies come from US. And all the brevet, technical brevet come from US. And you say we can't frozen. But this is a juridical answer. Politically, we always can frozen. So this argument was repeated in the newspaper. And the ministry was attacked. Because when you give an argument, you also involve yourself. You not involve only the argument itself. And what's happened? There is a different meeting during 3 days in the ministry. And the second solution, and they say we can't keep this solution. It seems that we don't arrive to exist in the public forum, we are attacked, and we're not really attached to this solution. It's not our solution, is this office of these few guys who is not a civil servant who do nothing. So they make a lot of meetings, and the director of department of energy say, oh, yes, I know, my guy in the office is very rude. They just understand the rights, they don't understand nothing. So maybe we need to find another solution. It's the department, the chief of the department, who opened a new solution. And what they say, you know, one of the main capacity to change the game is to modify the configuration of actors. He don't want to depend on these kind of stupid guys in the office who have not made a big school, who have not go in ENA, no, it was Polytechnic, and is not serious. So he said, I have a solution. First, we can ask to the company to stop. It's like a frozen. And second, we ask to real high civil servants their opinion. So when they say they ask to experts, they ask to 2 specialists coming from École des Mines to give them their point of view. Like this, they break the monopoly of the knowledge. They change the game of actors. One of the most important dimensions of the solution is how you change the configuration of actors. It's always very important, specifically when you have not the capacity of knowledge to produce a new policy solution. You ask a new actors, you change the game. And it's what happened. But, just see the time, but there is a conflict. It's never easy. Okay, 5 minutes again. So there is a conflict. What conflict is it? Inside the administration, you have 2 big departments with 2 big grand corps. The Ministry of Industry, with the group of mines, and who is in charge about energy. For example, you can't understand the position of nuclear power in France without understanding the role of this guy. But you have also the Department of Environment, which is also Department of Road, who is also managed by another grand corps. We call this the Corps des Ponts. They have both go in the same school. Like ENAP, it was Polytechnic. But they have not, at the end, they choose, some choose School of Bridge and some School of Mine. So they detest them each other. I make an interview with 4 of them. They're not far away to fight each other. Really, not only fight with argument. Then one of them say, oh, one day, I think we finish by... it's not young people. They are all near to retirement. Because generally, when you are specialists, it's the end of the career. So, 2 from the mean, 2 from the pont, and they fight all the time. They are agree about nothing. And when I say that, when I meet one will say, oh, you know, in the other, they are stupid. They just make a copy-paste of the internet, they're fine. They're not serious. And when you oh, you know, the other is not serious. They don't do a real job. They just understand what is industry and energy. They don't understand a lot of other things. So they hate each other. And even in the report, you find some trace where the group is not in agree between them. It's right in the report. What's happened? Between the ministry, it's a fighting, but also between the 2 ministers. The Minister of Environment and the Minister of Energy fight each other to become the ownership of the problem of shale gas. There is a big fighting, and the big fighting is also against who is responsible of the problem. If it's the Ministry of Environment, it means that shale gas is an environmental problem. If it's the Ministry of Energy, it means that shale gas is a gas opportunity. It has an impact on the meaning, who is the owner of the question. And they fight each other. To who they fight? They fight in the direction of the Prime Minister, who have in charge to regulate. And we have the chance to have access to a lot of notes, official or confidential notes, but they are in the archive. Generally, we not access to the archive. This time, we have the chance to have the authorization to see the archive about the notes sent by each minister to the Prime Minister. I don't know if this is one of the notes. This is a note of the Minister of Environment sent to the Prime Minister to say what she says in this note. She says, first, there is a shale gas problem. Shale gas problem is an environmental problem. This is why I'm legitimate to evoke. Second, it's not only an environmental problem, it's also a political problem. And to explain to the Prime Minister how is a political problem, what she do, she make like a review of press, of media, like you do when you want to understand how is the mediatic agenda. You know, it's interesting. It means that you need a process of importation. There is, oh, you see, there is number of articles who increase about the subject. There is most of people who speak about. So they try to sensibilize, and she said there is mediatic consequence and political consequence. We need to do something about shale gas. Please, Prime Minister, regulate this. And you have some note to explain that the Minister of Industry tried to convince also. So it's a fighting with the note, with this. What is sure is 2 things. I have not time to develop the last solution. But first, the fact that there is a lot of conflict about this solution contribute to make this solution less stronger. This is the first point. So the Prime Minister is really in difficulty in the sense that there is no consensus on the question. Second, in the mobilization, you know, what is the role of any policy solution? This is a real question, and I want to evoke this. The role of policy solution is not to solve a problem. If you think that, you just forget. First importance of a policy solution is to allow to reestablish order. If you have big mobilization, the question is how the solution I have can help me to reestablish order. Because I'm the responsible of the government, and as responsible of the government, I'm responsible of the order of the country. And what is sure is, during the 2 solutions I evoke, and the second solution is say, oh, you protest. Okay, wait, we ask to a real specialist and we will see. They hope that the protestation stop, or wait. But the protestation not stop. They continue to increase. The mobilization continue to become more and more with this thing which is stop fracking. So, what's happened? There is a division inside the government. What do the opposition? They say, ha. They not agree between them, even between the member of parliament, because there is some member of parliament who was attacked by the mediatization, by the mobilization, because there is some license in their territory. And the opposition, and well, you know, in the parliament you have no power generally. Most of the parliament, except when there is no stable majority, have no power. Everything is managed by executive in most of the country, in the policy-making process. But what is interesting in this case, the opposition see that there is a division, so they try to say, okay, let's go to produce a new solution, it's ban shale gas. They don't want to have any technical. We put a proposal of solution of banning shale gas like this. We push the government in difficulty because they have to vote. Because in the French system, one day by month, the opposition has the right to propose a law, which is generally rejected because they have no majority. So, but they have the right. But they would like to show how these people is embarrassed by the question and not. What do the member of parliament from the majority party? He understands that there is like a trap. If the day after, he make a copy paste of the proposal of the opposition and propose also to this proposal. And I have no time to narrow you, but during 10 days there is a really important fighting inside the government between these different positions. The position of Department of Energy, we say, oh, we need to continue to wait. Why we don't wait 2 years? Why 2 years? Because like this we go out the presidential election will be in 1 year. You know what like the bureaucrat? They hate the election in reality. They prefer to have the power. They want to be to not be in front of election because election is instability. So they put this and say, oh, we can wait 2 years. But there is fighting. The fighting is really in the hidden space, in the different arena. It changes every day during 9 days until the Prime Minister, I have no time to explain why, decide to fight, to choose the decision of banning, which is for him at this moment, with the President of the Republic, the only way to kill the protestation, because they consider that it's not their emergency at this point. Question. They have other question. In their attention and their political agenda is not considered that they want to fight for this. So, and for other different reasons, there is also Fukushima who arrived in the middle, and nuclear was attacked. And one of the ministers said, oh, if you don't want nuclear, you will have shale gas. So there is a lot of elements who contribute to modify the arena to push to the decision of banning shale gas. What is interesting at the end? To conclude. First, we observe that a public policy and a policy solution is never separate from who defined it and how people was joined around the proposal. If you want to understand the three solutions, how they emerge, how they arrive to impose, how the two of them disappears, you need to follow the trajectory of who have defined it. I don't narrow you, but in the text of law, you think it's finished, but in reality, there is 14 versions of the law. Each modification of the version is not something like this. It's a result of a process when people push for one thing. And this is the kind of trace you can use to understand who have an influence. We discuss who have an influence. This is an empirical way to understand. Second, a public policy is a statement which allows policymakers to give meaning and coherence to a set of hegemonic measures when the state, and through which the state is defined as a public authority capable of acting on society and restoring order and problem solving. This is my definition of public policy. If you want to understand what is public policy, you need to take into account the meaning people give to a public policy. And what kind of meaning they have. The first meaning is not just a meaning about problem solving. Is a meaning about how a government is capable to solve a problem. So it means that it's also a definition of state and its legitimacy. And it is something central. 3, a public policy is imposed through its capacity to interest enough multiple actors. I like this metaphor developed by Latour. You know, Latour used the metaphor of the Scrabble. Everyone knows the Scrabble. And you know, you can have 6, 7 letters, I don't remember, in your thing. And in the 7 letter, you can have the best word of the world, with the most number of points. Even with this, maybe you never win. Because your capacity to win is not the capacity to have the best public policy. is the capacity to find how you find a place in a lot of network existing on the table. So it's a wonderful metaphor that I like to explain how a public policy, an instrument, is not something outside the game of actors, is inside. It's something absolutely central. So the best solution is not the instrument who is the best to solve a problem, but the one who finds its place in all this network, and specifically including the definition, a redefinition of what is a problem, and the definition of the role of state. So last, I speak a lot about public order, and just want to highlight 2 points, and I finish. I begin in late, so I have 5 minutes. How we distinguish this question of policy, politics, and political? How is it? So, you know, in English they like, because they have 3 words to speak about the same thing, in French, but also in Spanish, in Portuguese, I think it's the same. We have 1 word, politique. So, it's not, there is some textbook who begin to say, oh, in French there is one who begins to say, oh, English is more precise. I don't think so. So, what is interesting is how we can define what is politics. What kind of definition we can have. So I have 1 minute, so I just give you my definition. In the literature, in reality, we find 2 kinds of definition. No, more than 2 kinds, but I just want to highlight 2. It's contradictory. The first one is really focused on the capacity of commanding and ordering. So governing, ending social conflict, reestablish security, condemning activities which destabilize the society, influence of leadership, science of commanding. Commanding is governing, is power, is politics. It's the first definition, and I put some picture. We say the police is also... police is a French word, an old French word, who have played a role on the burn of policy in English, so just for the fun things. So police, it's more you have police, more you have order, but also army, but also urbanism, when you're ordering the city. But also in the classroom, when you ask, in every country, we learn to, every children to not speak like this. They have to. It's an ordering way. How we people be socialized. So this idea of ordering the society is really important in a lot of dimensions. The second definition we have in the literature is what we call the disordering. There is some authors, generally not the same, who say, oh, politics is conflict. You think that politics is not conflict, is ending social conflict. No, politics is conflict all the time. Politics is opposition, is contestation, is partisan competition, is how you dispute order. And you have a third one, influenced by Hannah Arendt, and another guy who say Rancière, another guy who say different philosopher, who say that maybe it's just the 2 faces of the same concept, like the yin and the yang. Order needs disorder, and disorder needs order. So more you have disorder in a society, more you have order. If you have a terrorism attack, you have suddenly a number of laws who diminish the freedom of people. So the capacity to impose how you can impose the order that everyone stay at home during 1 month is because you have a big disorder. More you have disorder, more you give power to order. And that's the opposite. So it means that solutions need problems. If the disorder is solution need a problem. If there is no problem, there is no solutions, we have no government. So at the opposite, problem needs solution. Problem or disordering need to contest the government. So with this metaphor of the yin and the yang, I put the picture where there is police and protestation. So you buy more police because you have more protestation, blah, blah, blah. So it's always linked. Maybe the 2 concepts, the 2 faces on the same concept. And if you come back to policy making, finally, a policy making exists because you have problem, even if the story of the dynamic of problem and solution is different. So what is public policy? Is a way we explain how state reestablish order. This is why there is always a political dimension in any policy making activities. And this is what we need to take into account. And that's it. Thank you. As I was too long, there is no place for the question, but we can discuss during the lunch and during the 2 last day about this. So we have a break, and after this we have we come back to each group. Enjoy.